Soldering Filigree Demo. Welcome to my first video demo. This is a video record of the creation of a Larimar pendant using sterling and gold-filled wire. The actual process took approximately 40 minutes, but the video has been edited down to about 20 minutes. I hope you enjoy this sneak peek into filigree creation. Please feel free to email me at jeanne@jeannius.com with any questions. Here you see the original sketch of my Larimar pendant. We start with some step bezel. This is bezel wire which I have soldered a piece of flat wire to in order to make a step or support for the stone. We measure out where we want to bend it and we make a little notch using a small file. This makes it easier to form fit the bezel to the stone. You don't always have to use the notch. Sometimes it's just as easy to bend it around as it is in the bottom of this stone. But then when we get to the top again, we need to. Sometimes it's a good idea to take a Sharpie and measure or mark where you want to put the notch. Then make your next file mark. Now bend it carefully and fit to the stone. Once you have fit your setting to your stone, mark the overlap silver with a Sharpie. This is where you will saw the ends off the bezel. Sawing is the best way to get a truly flat edge on your bezel. Now, check the fit on your stone. If it's still a little bit too large, you can always sand down the edges or saw a little bit more off. You will likely have to sand it anyway in order to make a perfect fit between the two sides of the bezel. Once your bezel is relatively straight, matched up, aligned, then it's time to solder. We lay it on our soldering surface. Take some flux. And we need to cut some solder that we're going to use for this project. We use sheet solder cut into small chips. Now, once the torch is lit, we use our solder pick to pick up one or two small chips of solder, move it over to the joint, and you'll see we can just drop it right on there, and voila, it's soldered. You can see here it's soldered. It's not perfectly neat, but the next step is to file that down, either using a file or, for example, a Cratex wheel and a Dremel. Once that is done, and you have a fairly smooth edge, we're going to start adding filigree parts to this, starting with a framework. This wire is heavier wire. I'm using approximately 18 gauge square wire for this part. Make sure you file it so that it's going to fit flush against the main bezel. Again, flux. And we're going to pick up solder with the solder pick once again. This is very helpful for getting into odd little angles, such as soldering the base near the bezel. Normally, when we do filigree that's totally flat, it's easy enough to lay chips out on the flat filigree, but it's much harder when it's against a larger piece or an uneven design. After we've pickled and rinsed it, you can see that it's soldered together. Now we're going to take another piece. This piece is actually a piece of gold-filled wire. Because of the nature of the gold-filled wire, it is often a little bit stiff when you first get it, stiffer than sterling, so it's a good idea to anneal the piece before you try to shape it into the delicate curves of the filigree. It will form much easier if you anneal it first. Again, we clip a piece and we file down the ends so that it will fit nicely. And we shape it into a nice curl. Once we have our gold-filled curl, we're going to lay it out approximately where it's going to be. In this filigree, we're doing a piece that is a little different from the ones in my book. We're building it in a more three-dimensional fashion. Again, we use the solder pick to pick up a piece and place it where we need it to be. This time, make sure you get the bezel nice and warm because the solder is attracted to the hotter silver. In addition, you'll notice that we actually use the solder pick to reposition the wire without having to stop, pickle, rinse, and start all over again. This way, if a wire moves slightly, you can correct for that. Again, you see we pick up the solder bit, we go to another joint, and then we pick it up and pickle it.